Let's continue. Diderot is a philosopher, and he is an editor in the Encyclopedia, and so he writes all this commentary about things, and he is clearly a deist. He rejects traditional religion, and his most provocative arguments in the Encyclopedia are basically arguments against traditional religious practices. I think the excerpt in your book was about how he rejected monogamy, right? He said, why shouldn't we be able to get married to multiple people? So it was just an idea he threw out there. Voltaire, as we noted, Voltaire favors an enlightened absolutist leader. In his Candide, he obviously criticizes the church. He criticizes sort of pompous government officials that think they know certain things. He criticizes the way different actors in society behave, such as the institution of slavery, right? He's obviously noting the suffering involved in slavery and the hypocrisy of such a civilized group of people treating blacks so poorly. Beccarria is one of those philosophers that we can say is really a social reformer, right? He's advocating a very specific idea in his On Crimes and Punishments, which is how can we improve criminal justice? How can we have a better criminal system? And so he wants an end to the death penalty, an end to torture. He wants the point of punishment to be to help someone recuperate and not to just punish someone. And Adam Smith is a philosopher who also is thinking about how to improve society, and he is an economist, an early economist, thinking about how can we create the best society, and his answer is we can reduce government interference in the economy. We can reduce government interference in the economy, and this is known as the laissez-faire model. Laissez-faire, hands off, government stays out of the economy. And he, as well as other economists, they're known as the physiocrats. And they, many of them are French speakers too, they're trying to think about how can you best create wealth. And their idea is wealth is best created when there's maximum trade, and therefore get rid of all limits on trade. So Smith wants to get rid of internal tariffs as well as tariffs in between countries. He wants free trade. And the result of this is that people will do the things that create the most prosperity for themselves. So someone will do, someone who's good at, making cars is going to produce cars and sell those. And other countries that are good at, making shoes will sell shoes. And everyone will do what's in their best interest. And if everyone does what's in their best interest, there will be the most prosperity created. And so going back to the great Enlightenment goal, which is to create a better society, he says everyone needs to work for their own self-interest and therefore have trade between them, each other, and therefore will create a lot of wealth. Okay, Rousseau. Wow. Rousseau is a bit different from the other thinkers in that he's not as optimistic about civilization, right? These other thinkers think that, education and their learning and learning everything is going to improve society. Rousseau feels that, in fact, civilization has corrupted man, and that man was free in the state of nature, but now, in Rousseau's words, man was free, but everywhere he is now in chains. Okay? So he is enchained by these laws. He is enchained by the social structure that says that he needs to do the robot, provide this, service for his Lord. He needs to, so he's in chains. Laws that prevent him from writing what he wants, or speaking freely. All of these chains that man is in. So Rousseau thinks instead that man needs to go back to nature. and that in nature, man can experience truth. Now, what does this look like in reality? Later in his life, he thinks, okay, so what should actually happen? Obviously we can't just go back all flee into nature. So, in his later book called The Social Contract, which is the name of his book. So we've heard this term before, but he calls his book The Social Contract. He comes up with this idea that the government's job is not what Hobbes said or not what Locke said. The government's job is to do the general will, or to do what's in the best interests of the people. So how is this social contract different from the social contract of Hobbes and Locke? Hobbes' social contract says the government's job is to protect people, to create order. Okay, so order is what Hobbes wants. Locke says the government's job is to protect people's rights. So protect their rights, and they can run around and do everything freely. Rousseau says the government's job is to do what's in the general will, to actually do what's in the best interest of the people. Not to sit back and just protect their rights, but actually to do things that are in the best interest of the people. And so this idea of the general will is huge, right? This is basically the idea of Republican governments, like the one we have in America. Not Republican like the political party, but Republican like a government that's elected by the people, in which the elected people are expected to follow the will of the people, right? And we hear this all the time in our rhetoric in America, right? We say, well, the people want this, right? And, Obama's following the polls because the people want this to pass, or the people don't want this. And so we see this all the time, this idea of the general will. But the general will is also used by people to say, like Marx and communists, and even Hitler and Nazis, the general will there, they say, is, the general will is to do this for the sake of the people, and sometimes that might not be what we consider good, right? Sometimes, for some thinkers, the general will might involve taking some people's rights away. But for Rousseau, why is it the general will? The reason is, why is that the government's job? The reason is because Rousseau is sort of this weird dude, remember, like he gives up all his children to adoption and is basically never really content with life and feels like he's rejected by society. Rousseau wants to reconcile these two competing things, which really, much of political philosophy is about this issue. On the one hand, we are individuals. On the other hand, we need to get along in our societies. Okay? So if we have complete freedom as individuals, then that means people can pee wherever they want to pee or murder whoever they want to murder. So we can't have complete freedom. So we need to have some limits. But if society controls everything, then we won't have any freedom. So we need to reconcile these two things, right? And these two things are, the individual interests and the needs of society. And so Rousseau says that, well, if society does what's in the best interest of the people, what's in the general will, then the people will have maximum freedom because what the government has done is in their best interest. It's kind of complicated, right? It's like, well, maybe what's in your best interest is not to do what you want to do, but when the government does this for you, then you're doing what you want to do, or you're doing the best thing for you, which means that you have your maximum freedom because you get to do what's best for you. It's a little complicated.
So it's like you don't know what you want. We're gonna
Not all.
sort of tell you what you want.
Sometimes, and actually
Just trust us.
Yeah.
figuring out what the general will is very complicated.